3D WorldRunner. Okay, I have to be honest, this one I actually do know and have played, and haven't finished it, but I've played it, because I did it for the podcast. But even before then, it was still unknown, I'd never heard of it, because you can look back at the library of the Nintendo Entertainment System, and you often think Square, because they made the Final Fantasy series. However, did you know that they made this game, the 3D Battles of the WorldRunner? No, you probably don't know, although it's usually shortened down to 3D WorldRunner, released for the NES in 1987. Now, at simple glance, it looks like a simple arcade action style, but it holds an interesting place in history thanks to its unique perspective, its use of 3D technology. The premise of 3D WorldRunner is pretty straightforward. You play as Jack, nicknamed the WorldRunner. A hero must run through 8 different alien worlds infested by serpentine creatures known as the Serpent Beasts. The narrative is pretty light, as many games were of the era, but establishes enough of the sci-fi setting to justify the gameplay. Each world is broken into several stages, ending in a boss fight against a massive dragon-like creature. In many ways, the game borrows its structure from arcade titles rather than sprawling NES adventures. But what made 3D WorldRunner stand out was its visual style. Instead of being a side-scroll like Super Mario Bros. Or a top-down game like Zelda, 3D WorldRunner used a forward-scrolling perspective. The action takes place as the camera is right behind Jack, showing him running directly into the screen. This type of perspective is heavily inspired by Sega's hit arcade game Space Harrier, which used similar into-the-screen gameplay with enemies rushing towards the player. The NES wasn't capable of matching Sega's arcade hardware, however, but Square still managed to create a convincing pseudo-3D effect with scrolling backgrounds, scaling sprites, and fast movements. Added to the uniqueness was the game's 3D gimmick. Now, the original release of 3D WorldRunner came with a pair of red and cyan 3D glasses. God, you remember those when we were kids. And the players could actually make it a 3D mode by pressing the select button. Now, I've not played this version, so I've got to go with it and go, okay, yeah, because I played it on a PC. But this made objects in the game appear to pop out the screen, and at least in theory, again, you can confirm me if that's the case. The effect wasn't perfect, and the technology was primitive compared to modern 3D visuals, but at the time it was a novel experiment. And not many NES games attempted this, making 3D WorldRunner one of the most unusual entries in the library. Gameplay is deceptively simple, but also challenging. The player controls Jack as he's running forward, but you must avoid obstacles such as pits, walls, and enemy projectiles by moving left and right or jumping. The jumping mechanic is central to the game, as you often have to leap over wide gaps between platforms. Timing makes these jumps frustrating, since the perspective makes it difficult to judge your distances accurately, but also part of the game's learning curve. Jack can also fire projectiles to defeat enemies, but the combat takes a backseat here to the reflex-based running and jumping. The boss fights against the Serpent Beasts bring a slight change of pace. These large, dragon-like enemies swoop across the screen, and the player must dodge their attacks whilst firing back. They're visually impressive for the NES with long, segmented bodies that move quite fluidly. However, the battles do feel a bit repetitive because it's kind of the same boss when you get to the end. It's like, okay, I faced this one, but this one's a bit bigger.